cheer for?
Yeah, I don't know. So welcome once again to our videos for the family counseling course or for social work with victims of abuse. This particular case could also connect with our women in social policy class. So today's topic is criminal harassment. So criminal harassment, just even to start with, the term itself, it's really wide and vague. We've talked about it in some other videos, and it's one of those topics that kind of can mush and leak and smear into other topics. So criminal harassment could be thought of as bullying. It could be thought of as stalking. Sometimes it's in the workplace, sometimes it's in the community, sometimes it's on a bus. There's lots of places and spaces in which this uncomfortable behavior can happen. And for a minute, if we think back to our video on interdisciplinarity and intersectionality, which is another thing, what one woman feels is sexual harassment and feels very offended by and has a lot of discomfort around, another woman might not even notice as much, depending where you are on that continuum, right? So, for example, I waitressed in strip joints for 13 years in Greasy Spoons, and it was the culture of the place at the time for men to touch my bum, for men to make comments about my body, for men to offer me to do sex trade work with them. There were a lot of things that went on every shift because of the time and the place and the space. I had become kind of worn down and expected that kind of behavior because it was that space and place. And I'm a pretty resilient person with a lot of gritty experiences in my life. There's other people who work in other contexts, let's say an office environment, where your peer makes eye contact that feels threatening or makes comments that are very subtle but can create profound discomfort for somebody in the workplace, right? So criminal harassment and stalking, those are, I want you to see this as a wide and messy continuum. And our role as social workers helping people is whatever the client is being made uncomfortable by, therapeutically, we want to hear it and believe it and respond to it, right? If you are working with a lawyer or with a cop, they're going to have maybe a different take on what constitutes significant behavior that can be responded to. Okay? I'll give an example from another workplace, not a strip joint. There was someone who would talk an awful lot about himself. So I would go to work often after the 9 to 5 so that I could get work done. And he would, if he was there, he would talk and talk and talk and talk. And I would even say things like, I've come up here, getting right in his face, I've come up here to do my work tonight because I need to have this done for tomorrow, so I hope you work that out, and I'm glad you're succeeding at those tasks. Which for most people would be like, get out of my face, go. He literally twice followed me to my office where I was closing the door on his body, and he was putting his foot in the door and continuing to talk. Which, to me, was irritating, time-consuming, uncomfortable.
And disrespectful.
Disrespectful. And, I don't know.
Entitled?
Yeah, he felt very entitled. He was a person who was a rank above me in the organization. And all the stuff he was telling me had nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with my job or anything. I found him unfortunate, and I would literally go around the whole building to not step in front of his space so that I'd never bump into him. Other people found him so offensive that they complained, they went to management, they did all kinds of things. His behavior to me, I would suggest he was an asshole. He's just an arrogant, entitled asshole. I didn't feel he was being an asshole specifically and uniquely in front of me as a woman, my belief was he treated men the same way. He treated probably llamas or camels or dogs the same way, right? He just was full of himself. You know, people like that. But other people complained so much that eventually he had to leave that workplace, right? So I'm sharing that with you just to make the point that there's some behavior that it depends how tolerant the workplace is and how tolerant your colleagues are and what the escape routes are, let's say, to get away from that kind of person. So that's one whole thing. The whole workplace stuff is one kind of bundle
Well, that
of
and
stuff.
it also sometimes depends on the context. Like, I've had guys that were equally full of themselves, but they kind of put it in a more sexual nature when they were talking to me, in which case then it was more uncomfortable than if it were just plain, like, talking about themselves in any other way.
Precisely. That's what I was wishing to head towards too. Is that so it could be racism stuff, it could be homophobia stuff. There's a whole bunch of dynamics and energies, and some of this stuff it's very difficult sometimes to really. He would stand close to me. Well, that can also be a cultural thing, right? And he would literally follow me up and down the aisle. Not necessarily because he wanted to trap me anywhere. I didn't perceive him that way anyway. But other people did perceive him that way, right? So he could have been behaving differently with them than with me, right? And that's how human behavior goes. My point being that one of the points I want to make is it's a really messy, diffuse, nebulous terrain. And if you're ever trying to challenge this stuff organizationally, it can be a nightmare for the victim, because how do you prove he stood too close? Right? Or he followed me to my office and kept talking about his latest accomplishment. Right? Again, that kind of stuff is because it could get flipped and say, well, you're not, to me, or to the person complaining, well, you're not very collegial, or you're not very adult, that you can't cope with such a situation. So somebody follows you around and talks to you in front of the photocopier. He's just being a really friendly guy. He's kind of socially inept and pitiful.
But that was like the previous video where we talked about like implied threats, where like the seriousness of a threat doesn't necessarily need to be immediately like visible, but for them to then try and counter that and institutionally challenge it, like he put a wedding ring down.
Right.
Why didn't you just, you know, like...
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm saying to the, let's say if you were a 23-year-old social worker and you're in an agency and somebody comes to you and starts telling you a story that is on this end of the continuum of harassment or bullying or workplace discomfort, be prepared that it's going to be a difficult situation, because some of the behaviors are so wiggly and open to interpretation, and what one person I experienced him as annoying, and he was trying to take up my time, and I was in a rush, right? And had a woman done and said exactly the same things, I would have experienced it as annoying and taking up my time, right? But some of the women in that particular workplace experienced him as sexual harassment. Right? And let's say if I was a black woman or a black man, I might have experienced that as racial harassment. Like, why is he always bothering me with all this stuff? Why is he showing off in front of me? Is he trying to put me down as a person of color? My point only being that if you in your role as a social worker with victims of abuse or in a family counseling role, a woman comes to you and says, I'm really, really stressed at work. I can't stand being there. It makes me crazy. There's this guy who follows me around. He does this, he says that, he's always talking about himself, he takes up my time, he can't take a hint. You're gonna, of course, your role is to help her manage the stress, to figure out her options, to affirm and verify her reality, but also to prepare her that the organization may not be equipped to witness this as an actionable complaint. So she may have to spend a year or 2 years even documenting every time this happens, or maybe waiting to find a witness, or maybe make it push come to shove and say to him point blank, please stop talking. Step away and stop talking. And maybe he'll stop the behavior, right? Because that's the other thing that you want to advise your clients on, is some of these things you're going to get a better result to be more direct and assertive with the person. Maybe not. Her intuition is what matters. But if you're smiling and you're polite, which is what I was trying to do because he was a rank up in the organization, that I didn't want to offend him. And it also was a cultural thing. He was from a cult, not a Canadian culture. Okay? So there's that too, right? Somewhere I've got a book that I recently read. The title of the book is something like Conflict is Not Abuse. The title of the book is Conflict is Not Abuse. Sometimes in the workplace, conflict happens. Sometimes there are people who are really annoying. And part of our challenge, when you work in a place where you've got 1,000 other employees, you may have to figure out how to manage that. It may not always be fair even to the other person to even attempt an organizational complaint. So there's a lot of variables. There's a lot to talk about. Your first step as a counselor is to hear the story, listen to the story, witness the story, try to find really practical day-to-day strategies with the client, help her manage the stress of it, and help her prepare if she does want to take it to the next level. Start taking journal notes, start maybe even tape record the conversation, do reality checks with her, like, was that a bullying, was that sexual harassment, or is he just a jerk, right? Because it may depend on how many other workplaces she's been in. That's why I gave you the example in the beginning of the story. I've had experiences where literally men followed me home in their car and I felt my life threatened, right? So that is my continuum of harassment stuff, right? Or I told you about where they were shaking my car, that group of guys after work shaking my car. Like those literally could have been life-threatening situations, which are very different than, for me, a guy stands close to me in the photocopy room and he keeps talking about his accomplishments. For my own ability to be strong enough to express my feelings in the moment, I can manage that. Criminal harassment. Criminal harassment, whether that's racism, homophobia, whatever the intent or basis is, one of the things our role is to process the feelings and then to start educating and preparing for maybe you'll need to go to a next step. So this right here in British Columbia, this is some of from the Ministry of Justice. I'm going to give you some of the definitions they give for criminal harassment. Signs of stalking or criminal harassment. If someone is threatening you or your children, grandchildren, family, or friends, following you or your children, grandchildren, family, or friends, threatening or damaging your property or hurting your pets, calling you over and over, hanging up or not speaking when you answer, sending you unwanted repeated text messages, contacting you by email or through social network websites over and over, calling your children, family, friends, co-workers and asking about you, sending you things that you don't want. Or you feel that your emotional or physical safety is being threatened, you are afraid to say something about the person's conduct, you can't do what you want or go where you want due to fear, you need to you feel you need to change your lifestyle to avoid this person. So those are some of the legal suggestions towards criminal harassment and stalking. And this, of course, because we're focusing on intersectionality and all the other domains here, that if you're in a small community like Quesnel, or a really small community, one of the communities I did some art therapy stuff in was a fly-in community. There was one little confectionery kind of store for the whole community, a store about as big as this, and they had, you know, cigarettes and coffee and stuff like that. That was it. There was nothing else. So if it would be impossible to avoid someone that you felt threatened by, because they could say, I have a right to come here. It's the only place to get cigarettes. And there was a sort of deck around the building where people gathered and sat and smoked cigarettes or played with the dogs or stuff like that. So it would be really tough if your client was in that situation, because he can say, I have as much of a right to be here as anyone else, and there's nowhere else for me to go. So in small communities, you're going to have some real tough problem-solving strategies. So the next thing they say in here is keep written records, very detailed, and as quick as possible after the event. Who was there? What happened? When the story of the guy following me to the photocopier. How do I know he followed me to the photocopier? Maybe he wanted to get something photocopied himself. There's only one photocopier, right? So you have to sort of put yourself in a criminal detective kind of litigious place in your head, even while you keep your notes. So keep your notes and tell others of everything that's going on. Do it, of course, in an incremental, escalating kind of way. Because, again, in a small community, you don't want to be seen as, let's say I'm the white social worker in that Indigenous community, and I'm saying, oh, this guy is following me around. He follows me to the coffee shop, or the little tuck shop, whatever it's called. Because the Indigenous people might say, well, aren't you a prissy, sissy little white girl? Of course he follows you. Everybody goes there every day. There's nowhere else to go, right? So you have to really think about how you say will be heard and where on each continuum you want to take the risks to place yourself in that moment.
And how each system is going to view your scenario.
Right.
Like you said, through a medical model versus a police model versus...
Exactly. Where's your evidence? Because that's what a cop is going to say. Where's your evidence, right? And could you imagine if I called the police and said, this man 3 times in the last year has been in front of the photocopier, or he follows me to the photo... Because they'd say, well, every single person in that building goes to the photocopier every day or two. What's your evidence that he followed you? Maybe you think you're pretty special, Sai. You're not that important that people follow you around. Get over yourself. So, they also put in here, take good care of yourself, your emotional health, and so on. You can reach out to victim service workers for assistance and information. So that might be something you would wish your client to consider. So we've been talking here about the workplace and stalking and criminal harassment, but more likely where you're going to get this in your role as a social worker is the ex-boyfriend, the ex-husband. That's a more kind of statistical common thing. And a lot of women have good reason to be afraid, so that's sort of the other end of the continuum. From a guy follows you to the photocopier, your ex-husband threatens you, he makes comments to your friends and relatives. He has said, years ago, he said, if you ever try to leave me, I'll kill you, bitch. He still has access to the kids. He picks up the kids for his visits every 2 weeks. He says to the kids, tell your mom I'll kill her the next time she's late with dropping off the kids or something. So these threats do need to be taken seriously, and if the client tells you that she feels afraid, believe her, hear her, support her, encourage her to go to the next level, to maybe create more depth and safety for herself. They've got a long list here of if you move to get away from these kind of situations, make sure that you inform everybody around you, and make sure you try to almost get into the headset of being a criminal harassment kind of creep yourself, so that you can like tell the teachers at school, don't let my ex-husband pick up the kids. Tell your car mechanic, don't let my ex pick up the car. If I bring in the car to be fixed and you say to me, I can pick it up on Monday, and he shows up Monday at 8:30 in the morning, don't release the card to him. We're not married anymore. So you may have to go around and kind of cover all your bases. Go to your bank and tell the bank, don't let him withdraw money, or don't, you need to know we're separated. You need to inform all the doctor's office, maybe your dry cleaners, maybe your landlord, your post office, your pharmacy, if you go to the gym. You may, all of the places that your life has meaning, if you take a proactive stance and go to each of those spaces and say, just want to give you a heads up here that I'm separated from my ex, we're not going to get back together. You need to know that he no longer has any rights to any access to any information about me or my comings or goings, and I feel afraid of him, and do not give him information about me. So even your utility bills, your veterinarian, all the places that your life has meaning, and of course all the usual safety stuff about your home. Let's say you've split from your ex. So these are sort of practical step-by-step reality checks you're going to do with your client, your family. It might be the mom and her daughter. You educate the daughter too. Let's say the daughter's 12, so kind of problem solve even with the kid. Either through the mom, get mom to say these things to the kid, or ask the mom, bring both of you, come to the next session and we'll talk about. Because the kid might feel afraid too. What if daddy shows up at school, even though mom said I'm not supposed to go with him? What should I say? What should I do? Kind of put together your protection plan, your strategies ahead of time rather than after the fact. Keep emergency numbers. If you do make a police report, keep your file number, keep all this stuff near your telephones. I have a phone, and it feels uncomfortable to me to have the phones in the bedroom. When Ken was here, he always wanted me to have the phone plugged in beside the bed. So between his phone and my phone and all the beep beeps and all this stuff, I didn't like it. And now that I live alone, I want the phone with me to dial 911 if I ever had to. But so some of those kind of safety strategies, very pragmatically and detail by detail, walk a client through a list like this. They've got here, install extra outside lights, put them at a height they can't be removed, keep lights on in your garage and so on, motion detectors, security alarms. Sometimes your landlords can provide that stuff. Sometimes you as a social worker could go with the client and talk to the landlord on her behalf, because she might be shy and maybe she doesn't want to push the landlord. And so you could kind of play good cop, bad cop. You be the bad cop. You say to the landlord, come on, you got to do this. It'll be a good thing for future tenants too, to improve the lighting outside or whatever. Put boards in the windows so they can't be opened the whole length. All of that security stuff, and there's a list you can get if you want to Google it. What else do they have here? Safety on the internet, safety at work, safety out when walking, safety on transit. So again, each of those steps, you might even need to, for example, I always take the same bus, and until recently, I always took the same bus at the same time and came home at the same time, because people would know, oh, she teaches her class from, let's say, 1 till 3. Every Monday, every Tuesday, 1 to 3. And then I come home. So in that kind of a story, if my ex was bothering me, I might want to say to the bus drivers on Monday and Tuesday, when I get on, here's a picture of my ex, and just in case something ever does come up, I want you to know that he's been frightening me and following me and so on, right? So those simple things, again, the bus driver may not care and he may not really listen, but if a month later that guy gets on the bus and starts yelling at me, the bus driver, rather than ignoring it, might, discreetly dial 911 or something, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even if they can't help you, they might recognize the face later or something. Like, you never know. Sometimes it's just valuable to have the knowledge out there.
Exactly, and the woman herself may already feel sort of stigmatized or shy or vulnerable. So our role is to encourage her. These are your best practices. These are good strategies. And maybe even go with her on the bus one time and talk to the bus driver with her. Whatever it might take to strengthen her, affirm her reality, and in most of these stories, I would say, even if you inform the bus driver and nothing ever came of it, well, nothing really lost. But if you haven't informed the bus driver and he sees a guy yelling, he may not, or a guy gets off the bus after you and starts yelling at you on the sidewalk. If the bus driver doesn't know, it's like, it's not my business to interfere, right? But if you've informed him in advance, yay on you.
Yeah, that, or if he gets off after you and it looks like he's following you, that bus driver can know whether or not that's something he needs to worry about, because it's not unusual for a person to get off the bus. It is unusual for a person to get off the bus specifically to follow you.
Right, exactly. So these are some of the strategies you would want to talk with the woman about, and make it, let's say, safety hygiene, because you don't want to amplify all her fears, but you don't want to discredit or minimize her fears. Sort of finding exactly the right spot with each client.
Honesty without shame.
Honesty without shame, nice phrase. Yeah, honesty without shame. And make it sort of, these are best practices. These are good things for everybody to do in your circumstance, da-da-da-da. And safety in her car. And then the legal options, there's peace bonds. And there's a description here, and you could Google it with her. Peace bond is an order made by a judge in court to help protect one person from another. If you are the subject of stalking or criminal harassment, you can get a peace bond if you fear for your safety or the safety of your family or property. A peace bond lists certain conditions that the perpetrator has to follow. Well, this sounds good, and I would wish you to do it, and it is a good protocol or a good etiquette. At the same time, we know that in smaller communities, this may mean nothing to the person who's wanting to give you harm, right? So, again, finding exactly the right spot to say to her, these are some good, wise steps that we want you to take, but at the same time, it's not going to be like it is on TV, right? In some communities, there may be one cop, and he's not...
He can't patrol all of the city while,
or
waiting at your
rural,
house,
if it's 100-mile radius.
Yeah.
It may take the cop an hour to get there. So, i.e., don't depend on other people or other institutions or structures to do the best practice for you, because you may not get best service, let's say. It just may not materialize. Family law protection order, so that's... the order can protect you from a family member, which includes your partner, your child's parent or guardian, a relative. And it's again a similar idea. Just go through this list.
They also have like a notifying program. You can call BC 211 and they can help you with registering for it. And it's basically just that if you have someone that either is being charged or has been charged, they notify you about the status of them. And then you can double check with BC 211 to make sure that it's in order. But yeah, they'll notify you like if he's being released, if
okay, so if this is someone already in jail who's now coming out, you mean?
Not necessarily. It could even be someone that they've just recently apprehended that you're putting charges against.
Okay.
It's basically just supposed to be like so that they know that you're not supposed to be in the same area.
Right.
And then they notify you if there's something you need to know about.
Okay, well, good. So now there's some stats here, and I'll just go through with some of them. Again, this is something you might, if you were a family counselor and this kind of thing is coming up, or you're working at Elizabeth Fry, you might want to have this handy somewhere in one of your files so you could discuss it with your clients, but you can Google it and print it out. So I won't read all the statistics here, but so this is from 2018, and it's just got all different kinds of criminal events. The number of police-reported violent offenses in BC increased by 8.5% in 2018. There were more violent offenses in 2018 than the previous year. 907 uttering threats, indecent assaults, and harassing phone calls. There was an additional 727, 530 sexual assaults. Firearms offenses went down, and criminal harassment went down by 44%. Wonder what was going on in 2018. We talked in a previous video about sometimes the statistics are only kept by the highest offense. So if my ex-husband stabbed me, but he had been harassing me for 3 months before that, it might go statistically as one stabbing, not 28 episodes of harassment and then a stabbing.
Yeah, they don't count those microaggressions.
Exactly. So some of these numbers in terms of our worldview as social workers with family issues or social work with victims of abuse or women in social policy, it's hard to know what will this really mean in your own community. I would recommend that what you're going to get over a coffee with your colleague from Elizabeth Fry or from the women's shelter is going to be way more brilliant and useful to you than these statistics. It's kind of like right now, one of the things every day I watch about C19 in the statistics, and it'll say, oh, in northern BC, the catchment area, Northern Health Authority or something like that, the statistics have gone up by three people. Well, and then next day it says down by 2 or up by 11 or whatever. Well, if all of the cases are in Fort St. John and 0 are in Prince George, I'm kind of okay, right? Look, no stress. But if there's 27 in Prince George at the hospital, I better be on alert because the people at the hospital are being visited by their friends and family who then go to Second Cup, which is, just for those of you not from Prince, it's a 4-minute walk from the hospital to Second Cup. So if I want to have a coffee today, I better not go to Second Cup, right? So the statistics sometimes are so big and so vague, it's hard to know what meaning does this have right now, right here for my clients. I would trust more if I had a friend who worked at the hospital at intake. Whatever she tells me, I'm going to get that data. That's more meaningful about C19. Or for issues of criminal harassment and stalking or violence against women, Elizabeth Fry will tell me the real story in my community or the women's shelter. So I won't go through all these stats because as I look at them more, I'm not sure they'd be useful to you in your particular community. But you can find all of this. That's one of the great joys and wealths we have nowadays, that we can Google stuff and find out about it. There's some more specifics here. I'll see under criminal harassment what it says. Criminal harassment. So in 2017, in all of BC, there were 1,635 cases of criminal harassment. And in 2018, 1,591, so less. And then over here, I'm going to get something to, because then it says the charges. So let's see, just out of curiosity here. Ooh, so here we go. This is very interesting. This is, again, proves one of our problems as women and women's issues. So in 2017, there were 1,635 number of offenses, but it looks like 901 people were cleared. So more than half of the charges were just, nah, forget it.
They never turned into anything.
They never turned into anything. So again, the statistics, I would suggest to you that in all of BC there might have been 50,000 criminal harassments in that particular year, or 100,000. If we define criminal harassment as follows me to the photocopier repeatedly when I don't want him to, if we go at that end of the continuum, which doesn't even get it. All of those don't get on. The guy who follows you on the bus, the guy who's creepy, the ex-boyfriend who won't take no and he keeps hanging around, right? Most women won't, on that end of the continuum, report it, right? So the ones that do get reported, about half of them won't go anywhere at all.
Yeah, and then if you're defining criminal harassment as only the cases that have charges, you even lessen that.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit here now about the different types of stalking or criminal harassment. So they're saying here there's simple obsessional, there's love obsessional, erotomania, and false victimization syndrome. So as a therapist, social worker type person, it could be useful for you to know where to kind of help the client see this situation. Simple obsessional, it's usually male, known to the victim as an ex-spouse, ex-lover, former boss, begins a campaign of harassment. So that's what we'd kind of expect. Love obsessional, this stalker is a stranger to the victim or an almost stranger, but is obsessed and mounts a campaign of harassment to make the victim aware of the stalker's existence. And then it says here, although I would say to you statistically this is pretty uncommon, but it could happen. I know of one story where it did happen. It's a female falsely believes that the victim is in love with them. So there was the movie where Glenn Close plays, this guy is married, the guy is married, he ends up in bed, a one-night stand with someone, and she imagines that he's in love with her forever and they're meant to be together, and she starts stalking him and harassing him and does scary stuff. So she's imagining, it says here the stalker is usually female. I don't know. That doesn't sound that different from the love obsessional one that's listed above. And the false victimization syndrome, so there's 4 categories. The conscious or unconscious desire to be placed in the role of the victim. So that's somebody, I'm going to guess, although they have lots of definitions here, that let's say somebody worked at the post office, they're a terrible worker, they get fired, they imagine themselves now as a victim. Oh, Bob, my boss, destroyed my life, they ruined everything for me, my wife left me because I lost my job, because my boss is an asshole. So they see themselves as a horribly abused victim person, and they're vicious now towards the boss. You know those stories where you hear they show up at work someday and they shoot someone, or, you know, those are the extreme cases, right? But there's the lesser ones where they torment the boss that they imagine has traumatized and ruined their life. I watched a couple days ago Kaczynski, who was a bomber, who was apparently a very brilliant person, and it sounds like he also had schizophrenia, but he was imagining that there were people out there who were supporting technology and changing the world in a bad way, and he designed bombs to actually kill people, and he's called the Unabomber, and I think in the end he killed 5 people, and he put this reign of terror on different communities for 10 years, 15 years. He was living in a log cabin in bush country. Totally not the kind of person you would expect would be a bomber, and that's why he got away with it for so long. So there's a little bit about criminal harassment and stalking, and I would hope it doesn't happen often in your career, but you inevitably will have, at least if you work at a women's shelter, you work at a group home, you work in family counseling, you're going to have some of this on some end of the continuum. So being able to talk about it, the law, I would predict, is going to change during your career, so stay on top of it. Stay on top of who actually enforces the orders and so on in your community, because sometimes the police are very cautious about enforcing this stuff, but other times they're very vigilant and they jump right on it, and you want to be clear of who's going to be on my side and who's going to realistically do the right thing for this client, and then be on top of all the really practical stuff, that what kind of locks can you buy in home hardware that are cheap, what are good strategies. If the camera could turn over to the window there for a minute, could you do that for us, please? Sure. Over on the window, I've drilled holes. I'll come do a little demo. This is a white bush trash locking system. Sometimes I have this open for my cats, and you'll see I've drilled holes over here, and these cords go through, and they're quite tough, and they cost only about $3 each. So when I'm alone at home, I'm not as vigilant when you folks are here, because I think the 3 of us, we could kick ass if somebody tried to come in the windows. But I've installed these hooks. You can buy these kind of hooks here for about 50 cents a hook. Drill them in. And then these cords, you would be amazed how strong they are. And I've got them on the floor also, 2 on the floor. I've got the hole made for one more. Carlene's going to take me to Home Depot soon and we'll get some more of these hooks. And then it's hooked right into the door. So when I have the cats open to go in their little catio things here, and then I put all these cords around my cat thing. Even if somebody jumped on the deck and wanted to push this aside and come in, they would not be able to. They would have to smash the window, which I would hear, right? So that's having some strategies, some sort of white bush trash strategies, and also these pieces of board. If these are inserted in the window, then the windows can't open. These are ordinary things, but if a woman doesn't have a saw, you can remind her, go to dollar store for $1.50. You can buy a hand saw. It's not fabulous, but it'll do the trick. And you can get wood scraps from just about any home hardware kind of place, or even just ask your friends and neighbors who got some sticks. You could even use a piece of just this branch, a stick from out in the, if you're white bush trash, find a stick. But that means then that the door can't be opened. And I have these for all my windows. If my husband used to say to me, thank you Tuva for customizing that little bit of our video there. My husband used to say to me, don't be a soft victim, don't be an easy target. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. So he used to say those things to me all the time, and I loved him for a lot of his things. But that was one about, you know, if you every now and then you see these detective shows where they left the outdoor open, they left the window open, and you think, what are you thinking? Don't do anything that makes it easier for someone. You can't completely 100% all the time protect yourself, because, for example, if someone really did want to hurt me, sooner or later I have to leave my house, right? If there was a complete ruthless, crazy guy, he could sit in the bush right there and just sit until sooner or later I'm going to come out. Right?
But it would be a hell of a lot harder to get you if you kept the door locked than if you decided that it would be a really great time for you to leave all of your doors and windows unlocked and open. And also put yourself outside wearing high-vis and only high-vis.
Right. You want to, if you feel you're at any kind of a risk, wear flat shoes. You know, like there's a whole list of 100 things, and I would wish that as women we didn't have to ever think that way, but it is a true fact.
Women shouldn't have to behave proactively in order to prevent their own harm, assaults.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're in a space where apparently teaching men not to rape isn't enough.
Well, yeah, that's what my husband meant. Don't be an easy target. Don't be a soft victim. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't make it easy, right? Don't make it easy. In my building, I have, you all don't come here at night, so you don't see this, but I have you can buy just a light and put a 100-watt light bulb in it. LED light. It costs 13 watts only to run the new light bulbs. So I have 2 of them here on the deck. It just plugs in, and it's just the most basic lamp, and I have it 24/7 out there, so at night I get that extra light. And then I have the same in front of my basement window. So I've got sticks at night always. I've got sticks in all the windows and the doors. I've got 2 locks and a chain that goes across the whole door.
And a pack of 6 attack cats.
I've got attack cats. Right, yeah. So my point being that those are very practical things you might want to, if nothing else, it makes me sleep better at night when I know that all of these little protocols of safety are in place. I have my little ritual at night. It does make me feel safer. It kind of helps me to go to bed and not have my mind going in negative directions. So discuss all of that with your clients and be reality-based and be practical. She might, if she's just left the guy, all of this stuff that I've just described to you, it takes time and money to think it through. Where is she going to get a drill to make all those holes? Where is she going to borrow a saw to cut the boards? You know, again, those are some very practical things. If you work at a shelter or something like that, you might even wish to go and get your own dollar store saw and some boards and just keep those somewhere in your office so that you can lend them to your clients. These are small things, but if a woman is feeling overwhelmed, she just left this guy. She left with 2 suitcases of clothes and 3 kids, and she doesn't have any money, and she's all in chaos. Some of this stuff, unless you encourage her and build it into a very doable list, she won't follow through, right? So there's some stuff on all of the criminal harassment, stalking in small communities. I wish it wasn't so, but since we're talking about things that I wish wasn't so, you might be best to use some of that old-fashioned kind of hillbilly strategy of get your cousin to go talk to him and say, listen, Bruno, if you continue this, we're going to beat the snot out of you and trash your car and steal your dog. In some communities, it would be an elder who'd go and tell that to the guy, you know, don't mess with her because there will be payback. Maybe this is a good time for you to move to Vancouver for a few years. Right? So in each case, take the person seriously, listen to all their concerns, be empathetic, respectful. The truth she is telling you is the truth that matters, not the truth that the cop says or that the lawyer says or that the landlord says. We're going to hear that and respond to it in useful ways, but also find that kind of precise spot of don't amplify her fears and worries. Give her practical strategies to problem solve and encourage her that it has to be her whole network. It can't just be her. So her children need to know, the doctor, the landlord, the bus driver, the coffee shop owner. They all need to know what's going on, and it will put her in a position of more power and more effectiveness and more mindful peacefulness if everybody has had that conversation, just a quick conversation or a lengthy one, it depends. And if she needs you to go with her to do that, maybe that would be an appropriate aspect of your family counseling role. I would say yes, do it. You could literally be saving a life, right? Because some agencies will say, no, we don't want you going out in the community and just wandering around talking to landlords. Well, I would say to you as a feminist social worker and as someone who takes this stuff seriously, go and do it and explain to your executive director why you're doing it, and it does make good sense, and you can make a good solid case for doing all that follow through. And knowing that in the North these things don't play out the way they do in Law and Order in the 60-minute episodes. Some of this stuff can go on for years, years even. So she might have, if she's going to choose to stay in that community, she may have to put in place a lot of long haul stuff. It won't necessarily be overnight, right?
But that's kind of another part of creating that community or safety network, so that you have all of those people that not only know about it, but can potentially offer help or suggestions or even just like make any aspect of your transition easier.
Right. And sometimes you may even wish to help her move to Calgary or something. Right? That might break her heart, and that might uproot her kids, and there might be a lot of reasons why she would wish to not do that. But sometimes when she starts to think through how hard it's going to be to stay safe and stay balanced and emotionally resilient, she may start to think, well, maybe I do want to move for a fresh start to Calgary. And don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. Just tell your family, I need to go somewhere for a while. Me and the kids are going somewhere safe. I'll call you from where I am, but don't tell your sister's best friend's cousin's co-worker that you're moving to Calgary into this apartment building, blah, 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 blah. Because you may just drag your trouble with you, because if he is the kind of guy who's going to give you grief and rage and so on, you've just set yourself up to not succeed with this journey. And that sounds harsh, but surprisingly, the women often are innocent and they're good souls and they're gentle and they don't even reflect on it. I told my cousin's best friend's sister coworker that she could send the Christmas gifts for the kids to this address. No, don't do that.
Yeah, you can't assume that everyone has the same kind of heart as you.
And they may not even think it through. Well, he's their dad. Of course he wants to send them some Christmas presents. Mm-hmm. I gave him the address.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Right? So have a whole long list of best practices, protocols, safety strategies, and resources. Criminal harassment does exist. Sometimes it's low level, sometimes it's high level, sometimes it changes as soon as he gets a new girlfriend. He forgets all about you. Other times, the next time he's drunk or he's angry or next Christmas or Father's Day, 5 years later, it can still be a problem. Whatever her intuition is about the worst case scenario, I would go with that. Not to inflame her fears, but her intuition and what she knows about him and how his eye contact was when he threatened her and so on. She knows in her bones what is more probable. Like if she says, I'm worried he's going to grab the kids from school someday, believe that to be true. That's a risk. So help her work her way through that. So many times we've heard stories of people minimizing it. Oh, he was just mad that day. Or, oh, he was just drunk. Or, well, he just got fired from his job, so he said all those things, but he didn't mean it.
Then you're minimizing it.
Don't minimize. Don't minimize. No. If you're going to make any error, I would go more towards
extremism.
Well, put the good protocols in place. If she has a stick in every one of her windows and she's got chains and locks and lights and nothing ever happens, hey.
Then you're just extra cautious.
Yeah, nothing ever happened. Yay! Right?
And your insurance company will love you.
Right. If you're going to err in terms of keeping her safer and strategizing with her, okay, when you get off the bus on Mondays, get off at this spot. The next Monday, get off at that spot. The next day, go half an hour earlier. The next time, go half an hour later. Don't always have the same routine, and so on. So if she lives like that for a year, right? So, yeah, it's difficult stuff to manage in small communities. It's just so impossible because he will have the option of, let's say he gets his brother to harass you. So
good.
Right? The brother follows you around, or he gets his best friend to scratch up your car, right? So there's so many ways, if someone really wants to harm you, that they can get to you. So you have to have as many ways to protect yourself, and realistically sometimes, although it's a heartbreaker, move to Calgary or Prince Edward Island for a couple of years and do it. Just do it. Again, if she feels terrified that he might harm her or the kids, and she moves to Prince Edward Island and lives there for 5 years, and in the meantime he's arrested for some other crime or he dies from a car accident, yay, right? She got to learn what PEI was all about, and she got to have a new experience, maybe meet some new people, yay, and then she comes back. Right?
You can find a positive in something like that, but at the end of the day, at that time, it was still the best practice for her.
Yeah. And you may have to be an advocate many times where you go and talk to the school about don't let dad have access to these kids, or talk to the landlord and really strong arm him. Hey, your whole building needs better lighting. Your whole building needs a better security system. Right? You as the social worker may have to play that role because she's just not assertive enough at this time, and or she doesn't want to be seen as a troublemaker, or she's shy or crying or overwhelmed. So that's a piece you could maybe help move forward on her behalf.
Another one is also like perceived seriousness. Like sometimes, like for example, like when it comes to a landlord or something, sometimes the authority that comes with you being a social worker and talking to them at least, you know, like it's more substantial.
Yeah.
I feel like because there's a social worker, there's obviously a situation that might require a social worker.
Right. Well said. Well said. That to claim sometimes in social work we want to have power with our clients, and we always talk about that. Sometimes we have to use our nasty power, kind of, you know. I can go and say to the landlord, well, here, so are you saying you refuse to improve the lighting here? Are you saying you refuse to do these things? Because I want to have this in writing that you refuse this, right? That, you know, to do that sort of bad cop thing, that's a good point.
You get to use your authority for once.
Yeah, there may be moments where you can step up like that. So, it's tough stuff, and I would say for you as the social worker, get clinical guidance. You may want to talk these stories over with your direct supervisor. You may even vicarious traumatization. I had a client a long time ago who was being harassed. It was a co-worker, and violence was threatened. And I was working with this client for over a year. I saw her about every 2 weeks. She was going through the courts and lots of complicated parts. And he did have guns, and he had threatened her. And I was having really bad dreams. He had threatened to burn her house down with her and her family in it, and so on. And I was actually having dreams of my house being burned down, nightmare kind of dreams. I share that because sometimes you develop so much empathy and compassion with your clients, and you really know and feel so many dimensions of their story. And it is righteous and reality-based fear that they have. And of course, you're going to catch that as the practitioner, right? You're going to start having bad feelings yourself when you get off the bus, or, you know, it's contagious, it's vicarious traumatization, it's real, and reflect on that too. What are you going to do to purge some of that stuff from you? And yeah, maybe you want to do all your own best locks and lighting and all that stuff, but if you're still having bad dreams, you want to talk to somebody else about that and refresh yourself, because if you have, you know, 50 clients in a year and 10 of them have some story like that.
Refer back to our self-care video.
Yes. Refer to our self-care video, clinical supervision, all of those things. And yeah, thank you very much for coming to our video on criminal harassment and stalking. And one other thing of keep informing your community, because that might also be part of your role. If you're finding you have, let's say, Indigenous clients are being more disturbed by this issue, or single moms, or the women who live in a particular building are putting up with harassment by a landlord, there might be bringing it to the next level that we can do as social workers, and make sure that the police are doing the best they can, or the lawyers are doing the best they can, or the landlords or the municipality. I've tried to get better lighting in the alley behind my building, and the alley behind the building across the street, and it hasn't happened yet, but I'm not dead yet, right? I've met with two times I've met with municipal politicians about the lighting issue, and I've had a lot of other things on my plate the last 6 years, so as my plate has lightened up, maybe next year I'll be bugging them again about the lighting in the alleys. Because again, there are certain high-risk spots in communities where women get harassed or abused or threatened. So you might want to talk about that on another level. Mm-hmm. So refer back to our video on Take Back the Night and social justice activism in organizations and federal, provincial, municipal funding. And yeah, there's other places to bring that energy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tuva. Thank you, Carlene, for consenting to be on video.
Thank you. I fully consent.
Bye.